All right, in other videos, we've derived the equation for a circle. And now let's use the equation of the circle. So we've got the equation for the circle shown over here. This is called center radius form, specifically because it tells you both of those things about the circle. And so this would be like our general form of the equation. So I said if this were a specific circle, could we identify the center and the radius just from this equation? And so what we got to know is we got to know that for this formula up here, HK is the center of that circle. That ordered pair is where the middle of the circle is. And then this R value that's being squared on the right side is the radius. So those are the two values that we have to identify from this. So if we look at our formula starts with x minus h. We know that the h value, which is the x-coordinate of the center of our circle, comes after the minus sign in the formula. So if I come over here, x minus 1 is like our x minus h. That means 1 is our h value. So that means our center, our center takes the form of 1 comma something. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. If I look at my y-coordinate, the y-coordinate here, it says y plus 3. And so you might be tempted to say, okay, well that would mean that the y-coordinate's 3. But you gotta be careful here because notice this is in the form of y plus k, but our formula has it in the form of y minus k. And so the idea here is that addition can be rewritten as subtraction if we do this. This is the same thing as y minus a negative 3. Because when you subtract a negative, that's the same thing as adding. So if I identified that k value over here, if I identified it as the number that comes after the minus sign, in this case, the number that comes after the minus sign is a negative 3. So our y-coordinate there would be a negative 3. In short, if you look at the equation, the h and the k are kind of the opposite sides of whatever you see here. If I see an x minus 1, that means my h is going to be a positive 1. If I see a y plus 3, that means that my y-coordinate is going to be a minus 3. But that's the center. And now let's identify our radius. Okay? If we're looking at this and trying to identify the radius, you might make the mistake of saying that it's 4, but look, the right side of our equation is the r value squared. So you're saying, okay, 4, if you think of things algebraically, you could say, okay, well, if r squared equals 4, well, you can just solve and say, oh, well, that means that r is 2. Or you could just say, what number squared would give us that 4? And hopefully you can identify that, oh, okay, in this case, it's a 2. Our radius is 2. Okay. Here is our next example. If I look at this next example down here, this one doesn't look anything like this, okay? And so what I would like to do is I would like to rewrite it so that it looks a little bit more like this form, because then we'll be able to identify the h and the k and the r. So I'm just going to kind of, maybe I'll add x squared to each side if you want to, because I would like it to be over here on the left side, or actually I'll show that, so then I'll add x squared there. So we have x squared minus 9 equals negative y squared. Then I'll add y squared to each side. And so we have x squared plus y squared minus 9 equals 0. And then lastly, if we add that that 9 to each side, we have x squared plus y squared equals 9. Now I think this is looking a lot more like what we've got here, but we've got a little bit more work to do. So I'm going to kind of come up here and we're going to do a little bit more work. So if I have x squared plus y squared equals 9, I got to think, okay, how can I make this look a little bit more like this? How can I make this look like this without changing the value? What could h be? And hopefully you're thinking, okay, well, what if I did this? What if I said x minus 0? Because when you subtract 0, it doesn't change the value of anything. X minus 0 is just x. So this would be the same as this, and I could do the same thing with my y. Y squared is the same thing as y minus 0 squared, and that's equal to 9. And now you're saying, oh, now we've got it. What we had in this situation is we had an h and a k that were both 0. So in this case, the center of our circle is 0, 0. And then the radius If you were a fool, you would say 9, but you got to be careful. Don't say it's 9. Remember, it's some value squared that gives us a 9. Or you could think of it, oh, maybe I could just rewrite that 9 as 3 squared because our radius is 3. Okay? So there's 2 examples where I give you the equation and you have to identify the center and the radius.